Hi guys, welcome back to Within the Cauldron. I'm Nico. I'm running solo today, and then with me here is Dari. And Dari is a magician with over 2 decades of knowledge rooted in Mesopotamian traditions and an acting priest of Laverna, the Roman god of thieves. Dari's practice invites us to learn what it means to be in service to the gods, and we'll learn a little bit about Mesopotamian uh, practices as well. Good afternoon.
Yes, yes. Hopefully, we'll learn something about Mesopotamia.
It's a broad
So,
topic. Okay, let's see. So, can you tell us a bit about, just to break things for people if they're not familiar, what the Anunnaki are and their relation to Mesopotamian culture?
aliens. No, not aliens. We're not. The Anunnaki or the Anunanki are, it comes from a term that means the princely seed of Anu. Basically, these are the first children of Anu. They are the great gods that decree the fates. There's parallels with, when we talk about it, most of the time we'll shorthand talk about the seven who decree fate, who are the big seven. You've got Anu, Enlil, the lord of the earth and the
Mm,
king of gods. You've got Enki, the lord of wisdom. Ninhursag, the great mother, the earth. You've got Sin, the moon god. You've got Utu, the sun god, and you've got Ishtar or Inanna,
mm.
however you wanna. But those are generally seen as the big, great ones. They're not all Anunnaki, but they kind of terms go hand in hand.
Yep.
Basically, the first gods that preceded that came from Anu, and they're the ones who kind of put everything in order.
There we go. And then the with the role of the Anunnaki, historically they're seen as the great gods who decreed fates or acted as judgments in the underworld. How does your relationship with them reflect this role rather than the New Age ancient aliens narrative?
So, and this is something I stress very importantly to people who want to approach Mesopotamia polytheism, Mesopotamian neopolytheism, whatever. We're workshopping a term. But Mesopotamia and its belief, this is a time before we have Zoroastrianism introducing into the mindset. This is before we have ideas like Iamblichus's idea of fear. These aren't gods that are seen as to get tight with.
Mm,
These are innate forces of the universe, and so
yep.
they exist in that way. When we say, Enlil is the ruler of the gods and decrees fate, we're talking about like this is a solid pattern in the universe. This is not something you cozy up to. This is not something like they are here and all around us, but there is a gap. There is a bridge,
Mm,
a chasm between us. And so when you walk into it knowing like these gods are here, they are active, we can petition and call and offer and do all these things. But for the most part, approaching the deities is not like approaching the deities how most people nowadays will view it.
mm,
There's an aloofness there. There's a separation.
agreed. And then we have the Melemu, which is divine radiance. Ancient texts describe gods as possessing the Melemu, a terrifying, awe-inspiring physical brilliance. How is this conceptualized with this like divine aura in a modern ritual context? Do you get like flashbanged when you invoke your spirits?
So that is kind of, we all know the whole be not afraid thing, right?
Yep.
Angels come up in the Bible, be not afraid, terrifying splendor. That's what this is hearkening to.
Okay.
The
Yep.
Malala was a radiant skin. It was worn by the deities, of course. It was also worn by great heroes Lugobanda, Gilgamesh, and Enkidu. It was also worn by spirits and like more stronger demons, things that were of the supernatural variety. They were cloaked in a resplendent awe that is fundamental to their nature. And when us lowly humans are approached by that, there's something that is affects us. It's an effect called the need,
Mm,
and that's translates as terrifying awe, resplendent awe, and fear. And so that like idea that we're familiar with of be not afraid, that ooh, something is so big and vast and unable to be conceptualized by us that there is a fear to it. That's what they're clothed in.
mm,
It's not something we see occur a lot in ritual space because, like I said, with them being as aloof, the gods are in the heavens, the man are on earth. That is a very
mm,
important distinction. They don't physically come down to us. There are tangential facets of it that we can have in our ritual space and on our altars. But yes, if one were to come down, you would be quaking in your boots, cowering in fear, cold sweat, everything, because it is so, for lack of a better term, alien to everything we conceive of.
yep. Mm. Very similar to like the concept of Cthulhu, where the sight of him will break your consciousness.
Yeah, because they are. Try to imagine. So we equate Ishtar with Venus, right? So
Mm,
the Mesopotamian thought is, I can have my little Ishtar altar, and that has an aspect of Ishtar.
mm,
However, Ishtar is also the planet Venus. However, Ishtar is also bigger than and encompasses everything Venus. However, also is bigger than a cosmological scale. How do you fit in your brain all these aspects of
Gotcha.
like
Yeah.
that big umbrella?
Let's see. And then I know Mesopotamian worship kind of goes between super localized to what I would assume trying to create a like neo-traditional version where you have to kind of get into some level of cohesiveness. So they worshipped hyper or ancient Mesopotamians worshipped hyper local with specific gods owning certain cities like Enki with Erdu. Um, is this adapted with the like city state focus when practicing in a modern or globalized world? Or is it just solely based out of like historical context?
If you want to be a Mesopotamian, you must go to Babylon every season. No, no. So yes, different gods have their own tutelary cities, like Enki having Ered, which means Enki was the god directly responsible for looking over that city. If there was something that befell Eridu that was not good, we knew that it was the displeasure of Enki. Um, they would have temples where their statues would be that would have an essence of them. Um, but those temples did travel. Uh, well, the gods did travel from those temples during what we just finished a couple weeks ago, the Akidu festival, marking the new year, where these gods are all preceded throughout the different areas of Mesopotamia and end up in Babylon,
Mm,
and you could walk with your gods and such. So there is very much a localized locked there to it. Now, it is modern day. We don't all live out in the Middle East. We all can't safely visit the Middle East right now. So that does become a person by person thing. Like, it would be a stronger connection with these deities in their place, especially if we went to the gods itself. But as we talked about, like how all encompassing they are, there's nothing that stops me from being able to be in contact with my gods
mm,
where I am on like the opposite side of the world. Uh, and when we get into like the statues that hold the essence of the gods, that means there's a level of that essence with us. So it has taken on a very individualized view on how that is. It's created a lot of nuance and discussion in the community. For instance, I know there are some out there who will claim that because we cannot go to these temples, because we cannot go to these statues and make this travel every year, that that is fundamental to the work of a priest, and therefore there can't be priests. They're wrong. Priests are where community is. That's
Mm.
the important.
It serves the
And
community.
mine. Like, I can be a priest of this if I am doing the proper things, and that includes the community. It doesn't matter where I am. I mean, priests would have to travel. What happens if you're traveling from one town to another, and boom, there's a big desert sandstorm, and you're not in your hometown and you're not where you're going, but a festival and a sacrifice has to be done. That didn't stop priests back then.
Mm.
It shouldn't be seen as a wall that stops us now.
Right on. And absolutely, like the gods kind of go where the people do. On the concepts of spirits in the underworld, the Gadam or ghosts. In the ancient world, the Gadam were sustained by the offerings of the living. How do you handle the responsibility of feeding and remembering ancestors who may have been forgotten for millennia?
So yes, so the Gidim are the ghosts underground. They do, because it's believed, when you enter Kur, when you go to Irkala, when you cross those mountains, down there is nothing for you to eat but dust, and nothing for you to drink but mud. And so we do funerary offerings, and that is typically something that is done every month at a set time. These ceremonies, these offerings will be done of bread and water so that for the month they are sustained. Not only is this a way of remembering the dead and providing them sustenance, but it also protects you,
Mm.
because Mesopotamian magic and religion was highly judicial. If your grandparent died, and you for months, because you didn't like them, didn't give them offerings, then they could go and be like, hey, gods and lords of the underworld, hear my plea here. I'm being deprived my funerary offerings. My grandchild is not behaving. Let me go up there and fuck him up. And the gods would be like, we see your case, we judge it. Go up there and fuck him up for a bit. Teach him a lesson. And then you have to
Mhm.
go get the priest, and the priest is like, why are you not feeding your grandparent? You deserved this, but we'll fix it. Now, do the funerary offerings. So it worked both ways, where like they were
Mm.
taken care of and you were prevented from these bad things from happening. And when you may not know of them, we have prayers such as the Ghost of My Family prayer. Oh, you, the ghost of my family, you, however many progenitors are in the grave, the ghost of my father, the ghost of my mother. And you do
Mm.
that, and I leave these libations for you, and these offerings for you, that I might pour a sweet libation, look favorably upon me from now until the time in which I join you, da 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 da. So not knowing the names was not necessarily something that stopped it.
Mm.
Now, going back further than 4 or 5 generations also wasn't generally done, because there was this idea, and some modern Mesopotamians polytheists will ascribe to it. Some don't. I personally do, because of connections with other stuff I do, of the idea of the Etem Kimti. So what that is that the Atemnu, that living spirit part of you that goes down. Um, it will exist in the underworld only for a time. And that time is generally 4 or 5 generations back, after which point you no longer become an individuated spirit down there. You join basically the gestalt of all of a person's ancestors. and your job is then just looking after your bloodline. And they normally hearken that to 4 or 5 generations back.
mm,
At that point, you're talking like 200-300 years, depending on how long you count a generation. So, it is, names get lost in time, and they recognize that, and these coalesce together. We can find parallels with this and other things about like when animals in the wild are interbreeding, 4 or 5 generations is like a good, healthy spot for them,
mm,
so that you don't have like you have a strong genealogy record, but you don't have a lot of the like problems that come from increasingly and repeatedly inbreeding animals together. About 5 generations gives you like the strongest stock of a cow, and I know farmers still today will do that.
mm.
So we cut it at like 4 or 5 generations, and if we don't remember the names coming up to that, oh, you the ghosts of my family.
Love that. We have a very similar concept in Treadcraft with uh, the nameless, and then the nameless, the beloved, and the mighty dead, which are like different aspects of like the ancestors, where if they've been lost, they can still be venerated. S-
Yep, because it goes like sometimes you have children that died very young. They
mm,
may not have named yet, so you don't have names for those. Maybe you had family that fell in battle, or as the Elamites or the Hurrians came in and wiped out a
mm,
city, records were smashed, but you know that you had family from before this moment. And just because you don't have a name doesn't mean you don't have a connection to them. And it was very important. Keeping ancestor veneration as a practice is one of the earliest things we find in archaeological records, and it's one of the things very heavily focused on Mesopotamia between burial goods,
mm.
funerary rites, these kind of things, and the offerings. This has always been a core part of magic, and
Yeah.
so they had answers for all of it.
S- the difference between beneficent and malignant spirits in Mesopotamia, they had a complex ecology of spirits, from the protective Lama to the predatory Lamashu. How do you distinguish between working with a deity and managing the smaller, more volatile spirits of the atmosphere?
So, again, like I said, we're talking about a time where dualistic thought hadn't really entered into the
Mm,
mindset. So a lot of what we would see nowadays, we they had a lot less. Demons are absolutely demons. They're absolutely negative beings. But we have records of rituals in which, if I was doing a working, I would call upon my personal Lamasu, my personal, protector spirit. But I may also call upon a Gula demon, one who crouches at the threshold, and have them placed and crouching
mm,
at the threshold of my circle. They were things that we drove away when they caused problems, but
mm.
they all could be seen in a very beneficial way.
Yep.
The easiest way to best example is Pazuzu. Pazuzu is a fearsome demon. He brings plague, he brings disease, he brings exorcist movies, which gave him a bad rap. But
Mm,
he was good. However, if you were with child or you had recently been given a child, you recently had given birth, not given a child, but you would hang a Pazuzu amulet upon the door of your house. And because Pazuzu was such an evil, frightful demon, he scared away Lamashtu, who would come and kill the child. And
mm,
so, where it's like, hey, we understand that you're a demon, but like, you chase and hunt this other demon. And so, if we put your face here, she doesn't come near. And so we would use like this, but we didn't keep it too long, or then you had a plague in your house. So, like,
mm,
you
mm.
had it long enough for that. that vulnerable area, vulnerable time to do that, and then you took it away. It was given to another family. These things would be passed around the town, or sent out to other towns. And so we would use a lot of the nefarious demons to drive off other nefarious things, or we would see someone's personal benevolent demons as in some way spirits being harmful to us. We also see this both sides of the same coin in the gods.
Mm,
Um, did a video on this one time about we got to have a real honest talk about Ishtar here, because
mm,
Ishtar is not Aphrodite. Ishtar is not love and beauty and self-acceptance and the divine feminine. Ishtar is a goddess of war. Ishtar is so vengeful at times that we have a story where she goes up to her father Enki, her uncle Enki. She's like, Uncle Enki, nobody wants to hang out with me. They say I'm too much, I'm too extra. Well, that's because you're incredibly stubborn and vengeful. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. I'm not. All right. You don't need your vengeful part then, right? You don't need it? No, because there's no part of me that is that. Okay, you're all just happy, fancy, lovey, wifey? Yeah. All right. So I'm going to take that part out of you and make it into its own person. That deity becomes Zultu, becomes strife. And what ends up happening is Zultu goes and she can't keep anything under control. She's smiting people left, right, plague, crops wither, all that. No, nothing can get done. And then Inanna is too much of a pushover at that point.
mm,
She's got, and so in some of the stories she's created to prove a point, at the behest of the other gods, where Inanna and Zultu have to fight it out, and only like the rejoining shows Inanna what she truly is. And so we see this dualism, this like two sides thing, and this non-dual view in our deities. Like, yes,
mm,
sure, Ishtar was about love on like a cosmic thing, but like she did send the bowl of heaven after Gilgamesh, after he rejected her wedding proposal. That was a massive deity from the underworld that she got mad one day and said, "Open up the gates of the underworld, or I shall tear them asunder. And if I do not get my way, the dead will outnumber and feed upon the living." Like, that aspect is there.
yeah,
We understand there's a terrifying, for good reason, there's a terrifying aspect to
mm,
the gods. Not all good. Even in Horsa, the Great Mother.
yeah,
Yes, she burst the mountains, she burst the crops. She also burst volcanoes, and those take
mm-hmm,
out the thing. Desert Storm, Enki's Lord of the Wind. He's got 7 wind spirits he will send that will wipe a town if need be.
absolutely.
So we
And I think
don't
it's,
differentiate these.
mm, I think it's a trope that gets lost in some neo-pagan societies and cultures is that they they want to progress and view things as like all loving and kind, but nature is both kind and cruel, and we're also a part of that cycle. Humans are incredibly violent, and they forget all of that. It's like the whole love and light concept drives me up the wall.
It's like
uh,
that Mary Shelley quote, I have unbounding love within me and anger the likes of no one has seen. If I can't satisfy one, I'll satisfy the other. It's like,
mm,
yeah, that's people, that's spirits, that's gods. I don't know what y'all
yep,
want here.
yep. Let's see. On the nature of Arelka. The Mesopotamian underworld is often described as a dark and dusty land of no return. How do you reconcile this somber historical view with the more modern, ascension based spiritual perspectives? I know you're very traditional on that, but how do you put this in a contemporary setting? Because could be a very nihilistic point of view.
And see, I get that a lot. I find it very comforting. I am out here, I am living life with all its little ploys and all its machinations, and as a neurodivergent person, all the subtext I don't pick up on, this and all these little million things of any given interaction in life. But when I die, I will cross the mountains. I will go to the land of Kur. I will go to Erkala. There will be nothing for me to eat but dust and mud. I will live a shadow life that I've lived, and I will be judged at any given moment by the judges of the dead. If I have
Mm,
been well and treated my family well, I'll receive a little sweet treat here and there. That's comforting to me. There's no grand I don't got to go around. There's no reincarnation. I don't got no karma, no moksha. I don't have anything. There's no wheel spinning around again. When I'm done, I get a much deserved rest. And that's
mm,
kind of it. And, we do see it is seen as kind of a dark and shadowy place. We do have Enkidu's Dream of the Netherworld, where it's like this happens to the person who fell in battle. This happens to this with one children, with no children. This happens to children that died, and that can look very bleak. But that is specifically something that's tied to the royalty and to higher ups and
mm,
officials. The common person would just go down there. There's very little difference. You are a shade of yourself. You will receive libations and offerings after 4 generations, and my family has children young. So if I, have a generation, they have a young generation, I got maybe 80 years down there. Every 20 we
mhm,
pop someone. I cease to be in any way that is me, and my whole thing is now watch over my bloodline,
mhm.
and I fit back in with my family. Like some people see it nihilistic. I see it as very comforting. Like this is very straightforward. This is what to look forward to. All the nonsense you deal with in life, rest. It's out of here.
Yeah, I could definitely get that perspective because no, I'm tired. Reincarnation's not happening. Mm-mm. No, if I get to say it, it's not. If they get forced, coming back as a goat, I'm headbutting people and chewing on children.
Exactly. Like I don't wanna do this wheel. I don't wanna spin the wheel again,
Yeah,
you
if I
know?
come back, I will just be a problem.
Yeah. I mean, statistically speaking, if I come back and everything's got a spirit, then I come back as a bug. That means I'm only gonna be here for like 2 weeks. I'm gonna come back to something new. And then
Hmm.
something new. And I'm like, no, I just want to be done. When I'm done, I'm done. There's no immortality. There's no bigger thing. We have the Epic of Gilgamesh. The entire back half of that story is after Enkidu has died, who did nothing wrong, by the way. He did free my boy. He did nothing wrong in that whole thing. There was a humbling that needed to be done, in my opinion. But Gilgamesh mourns him like a lover. Well, that's a whole thing. But then he travels, he covers his head in dust, and he throws on the animal robes, and he travels the lands looking for immortality. And there's a part in there that has always really struck with me, and it's essentially summing up the beauty of what Mesopotamian tradition is.
Mm,
He's traveling in the desert, and a wandering trader is coming into the city and sees him on the outside of the walls of his city. And it's "O Gilgamesh, wherefore are you traveling? Why are you looking? What you seek is not allotted for us. When the gods made man, they allotted for us death. Only life they kept for themselves. Go, every day be joyful. Rejoice, dance and sing and make merry. Let yourself be bathed in clean waters. Let yourself be anointed in fine oils. Enjoy the laughter of a child. May your wife, enjoy your repeated and many embrace, for that is the lot of life." And I'm like, that's kind of it, right? Like,
mm,
wrap it up. We're done. We solved this 6,000 years ago. Life is for the living. We will die. Until then, enjoy children and food and wine and love and all these wonderful things, knowing that it does end.
mm. Let's see.
So a lot of Mesopotamia was focused more on the life of the living
Yep.
because that's where we are.
A question about one of the rituals I came across from the Mesopotamian period, which is the ritual of mouth opening, the mispi. Uh,
Yes.
Historically, it was used to like ensoul or bring statues to life in a way where deities would inhabit them. Do you perform similar consecrations? And how does that change the way you view altar icons?
So I know I did just say the beautiful simplicity of Mesopotamian religion, but here is where it gets crazy
Yeah, they have
because
high
they're not
ceremonial practices.
and they're not altar icons. That is the god. If I
Yep,
sit here and
it's
I
enlivened.
fashion a thing for Enki or for my god Asaluhi, and I fashion it, and I do the Mispi and the Peetpi, the opening of the mouth and the eyes, I do that whole thing. That is my god. I am
Mm,
instructed as a priest now to feed it, to clean it, to bathe it, to dance in front of it, to dance and sing and entertain it. That is my God right there.
mm,
And so, look, it even got so crazy that if you look at like some victory steles that kings would write, there's talk about gods abandoning towns. And what is happening there is you go to war, say Eridu goes to war with Uruk when they were city-states,
mm.
and Eridu wins. Well, then you take the statue of the god out of the town. The town's not, the god's not in the town anymore. You have
Yeah,
literally
you
displaced
literally
him.
take it out. Yeah.
Sennacherib, the Mad King, he he was out there. He had some things going on. He put a statue of Marduk on trial to put the god on trial. So like these statues were the gods in a way. The rituals were very complex because human man cannot make God. Only a god could fashion a god. So you end up doing this very intricate crafting of a statue and such, and then you do similar to what the PGM ends up doing with like this is not wine but blood. It's like it was not
Mm.
mortal hands that made this statue, it was the hands of the gods. And that because the sculptor had to be and
Yeah,
assume
the vessel.
God's
Mm.
finish. And then back in the day they bathed it in like a trough of lapis and carnelian and all this stuff. I don't have the money to do that. There have been modern takes on the Mispi and Pete P where you do continue to do the ensorceling, but since we can't go buy thousands of dollars of rare jewels, some of them we can't even ethically source, people have put forward. I think Samuel David put forward an alternative. A couple other people. So the tradition carries on as close as possible as it can. I just cannot fill my bathtub with lapis lazuli.
Mm.
But it does change the way, you go to the altar and there's a statue of the god you've swore yourself to, you've taken a theophoric name for, you've said, I have tied my life to you, and he's there on the altar. It changes things. I used to have an altar in my bedroom. After a couple having company over at night, the altar had to leave the bedroom. It
Mm.
could not. You cannot have company over in your bedroom and have the altar because they're there. It's like, is this really what they should? And because of this, Mesopotamian priests actually took a large amount of steps to even approach these altars that were their gods. You needed to be clean. You couldn't be sick at all, not even a tiny cough, and you were completely naked because you're before your God, right? The inner
Mm.
sanctum of the temples was done with completely disrobed because why are you putting clothes on? It's the God. For you were formed in a certain way, and this is how the gods formed you. That's it. So that whole thing, I know forever, whatever you want to call it, skyclad, whatever, has been a thing for such a long time. Mesopotamia
Mm.
knew what was up with it. There's many things that I wish people knew where they're like, we get, oh, well, this is an ancient thing from ephemeral area, or people being like, no, the Wiccans did this. And I'm like, the Mesopotamians. Hey, y'all, I was in a call the other day where people were talking about casting circles and why the cardinal directions and how it was tied somehow to Greenwich and how the elemental correspondences, because north of Greenwich is this and the different terrains, and that this kind of idea of the circle with all this comes from something that Wicca really did. And I'm like, Mesopotamia had circles. We did it with flour, and we did the flour all around the Jishuru, and there was a whole thing of purifying and creating a
Mm,
space. Like there's there's a lot of things. I joke with people like it's all Mesopotamian in the end. You pour one out for
yeah,
your dead homies. It was Mesopotamia.
Libatian, Greco-Roman, Mesopotamian. It's a gap of people in modern practices don't put the time or energy into sourcing the origins of some of the things in the practice. They take them at face value. And I see that a lot where they'll read like a book on it and be like, I know everything there is to know about this practice, and then never like look under the rug. To
No,
be like, actually, this is like a hodgepodge of like 9 different practices, and we're looking at it like, why does this exist?
and it's very hard with Mesopotamia. We have a
Yeah,
lot of information to cut through.
there's a lot of uh, deconstructed Christian viewpoints and like filtering through all sorts of stuff as someone who also researches like historical witchcraft, which is both annoyingly and gratefully preserved through the lens of like post Christianization, that it gets really annoying because it's like, okay, I venerate a spirit called the Ragamuna, who's an agricultural spirit that lives in fields. They say she's a hag that like kidnaps children and beats people to death with her abnormally large bosom. Uh, but she does this as a parable to keep children from getting lost in the fields,
Right?
versus she's more akin to like the Norse goddess like Sif, where she rules over the fields and is both like benevolent and cruel, where she can be appeased. If you don't fuck with her cornflowers and like she's fed, your crops
Then
are gonna be great. Like you're
right.
gonna have like, but like if she's pissed off, like whatever goes in that cornfield is a snack.
I know it's very hard with Mesopotamia because, and I talked about this a couple weeks ago around Easter because the whole Easter Ishtar thing
Hmm.
kicked up, and somebody had taken a new angle for it that I had really appreciated. They pointed out like who benefits from popping up and being like, actually, these aren't connected. And I really enjoyed that take instead of them being like, it is or it isn't. It was who does it really what benefit do you get from correcting these people? Because it
Mm,
opens up this dialogue
yeah.
where Mesopotamian polytheism sits in a almost ironic situation. It
Mm,
is the oldest of our recorded religions, but as far as neo paganism goes and modern day witchcraft, it is the newest. I mean, we didn't have any understanding of Mesopotamia really until World War One with Lawrence of Arabia and Agatha Christie uncovering it, which is a wild story. Uh, so it wasn't until the 20s or 30s that we start to even be aware. And then we find the tablets, and it's still decades of translating this. And then it doesn't hit the public until very early on. We're maybe at most 50, 60 years old. And because of
mm,
that, we have to sit here and show our validity to the community while also having, Zechariah Sitchin's mistranslation of the ancient aliens stuff. Eric von Daniken, who recently passed, doing his stuff, as well as I probably shouldn't name names, right? But there are some very current writers that are bad actors in messing up Mesopotamian mythology to
Oh,
push
that's as a
whatever
whole across paganism. But yes.
it. It's gotten so bad. People I have in mind, you can give me a paragraph, half of a paragraph out of their books, and I'll be like, I know who wrote that. Like I've had to develop a nose for it because
Mm-hmm.
when into stuff where like Tiamat is a deity that the Mesopotamians worship. No, we didn't. I've had to have that discussion. I've had to have the discussion of Enki is not Lucifer. These are not aliens. We didn't do magic for self, and
Mm,
all these ideas are things that try to be propitiated in modern witchcraft because we're so new. There's no organizing body. Most people haven't heard of us, and we
mm,
got to break. I mean, the Simon Necronomicon that came out in the 90s that tied Lovecraft to Mesopotamia. There's a lot here that
yep.
we have to contend with, and it's a
Mm.
struggle. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So they have Mesopotamians have a concept of fate and the tablets of destiny. It's a central theme of decreeing of fate uh, within their practice. Is fate seen as something fixed by the gods, or is it something that can be negotiated through like rituals, petitions? Uh,
So it's multi-level. There is an ultimate fate for the cosmos. Enlil has that tablet, the literal tablet of fate, hanging around his neck. It is the sign that he is the rulership of the gods. It has been inscribed by the gods and decreed. That is unchangeable. There is every year at the Akitu Festival, which is our New Year's. It happens in spring. Um, Generally, the first sign of the moon after the solstice is when it's celebrated. That's the time when Enlil will inscribe upon his tablet what the fate of the world is to be and of all people for the coming year. And that's generally locked in. Now, people can attempt to transgress this fate, which will bring the ire of the gods, and so you have bad luck. Your fate can change if you are transgressing your gods. If a plague has stricken, you're sick with something, and you don't believe you have deserved this fate, you could go to a priest who, like I said, magic was very judicial. So the priest would act as like, Phoenix Wright, counsel for the defense against the gods. Like, objection, my client should not have a tooth infection and an abscess right now. Remove this demon. He's been a good, humble man who loves his family. And the gods would be like, he is good and humble. He did give us an extra cut of the sacrifice last week, and he didn't need to. Yeah, no more. For the next year, you will have no toothaches, and the gods will have decreed it. And so Enlo will write it down on like the amendments section. So it is unchanging, but you can make a case. They could also be like, no, this man's not. I've not seen this man in temple in 8 years. Why would we change his fate? Let him
yeah.
suffer. So, like it was very much about a right way of living that did three very important things in Mesopotamia. If you, in order, honored the gods, you served the gods, then you served the community, then you served yourself, then when troubles befell you, a judgment could be overruled.
Mm,
But if you were out here doing what we call kasapti, uh, uh, doing malevolent magic, making people fall in love with you in magic, stealing magic, blighting your neighbor's crops. It's kasapti, and the gods will not judge favorably. And generally, that bad thing that happened to you was you got executed because for the Mesopotamians, anything you did with magic,
mm.
if you hex somebody and they died, there's no difference to them than if I stabbed that person in town
Yeah, it's
square.
still a murder charge. Yep.
It's still a murder charge. So, like, they looked down on it so heavily, and so did the gods. They're like, if you can't act right in society, why should we give you nice things?
Yep.
Which
Mm.
you can all understand that.
Yep. It's like an extreme view of like curses in like Greco-Roman culture where you're you have like a bank account with the deities, and as you give them offerings, you can pull favor from that. But if you're
Yeah.
not putting anything in, you don't get anything back.
And sometimes if the issue didn't have to deal with your god, like my god
Mm,
is Asalugi. He's the master of exorcisms and incantations. Well, if my sheep are dying from roof rot or hoof rot, that's not really an Asalugi thing, right? My
yeah,
gods aren't gonna step in and be like, Enlil, what the hell, man?
yeah,
Now, my god may step in other ways and be like, Dari, you know what magic can help this. And I'm like, yeah, okay, let me go get the water and do the da da da. And they'll help in that way, and we can mitigate the effect of fate. But ultimately, we can't change fate. The fate is in the hands of the gods. So literally,
mm,
Namtar is the term for fate as well as the god of fate. It's similar to the Greek idea of Anunke. Everything
mm,
is it's done by necessity, and
yep.
that exists beyond morals. Whether it looks like your fate is fair or not, this is
Mm-hmm.
necessity.
Let's see. On historical integrity versus personal gnosis, where do you draw the line between following what's written on like uniform tablets and using unverified personal gnosis to fill in gaps in a 4,000-year-old tradition that hasn't survived in its totality?
So I'm very against the grain here. I'm very traditionalist. I can create an entire practice out of just the tablets. We have the priest handbook. We have the
Mm,
Maklu. We have most of the omen texts. Everything that I would possibly need to encounter, I probably could from the writings. So I don't do a lot of UPG.
okay.
I'm
Mm,
very, especially in this day and age. In a sense, I've become very anti UPG as I've got older because the way it's treated is no longer a way where like we use UPG to
bend
deeper
things. Mm,
stuff. We're doing it for we're doing the Protestant thing, but with a new paint. All that
yeah, they
matters
are.
is
Mm, hmm.
my interpretation. I'm like, but I mean, even I think it was Plotinus who said, never make the mistake of thinking that the gods need anything from us, or that it is our intent of the sacrifice that makes it worthy. It is the god's judgment of the work of a sacrifice's worth.
Mm,
And because Samuel's it's all controlled by the gods. The gods are real, actual things. They don't change. They're able to be understood, but they're unable to be changed. And so that idea alone cuts out a lot of where UPG can flourish.
mm,
Now, can I sit here and be like, oh, well, there's a reference to this, and there's this giant long list of demons that we recite to drive away in the Maklu, no la tehu, la rabu, la da 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 da. That's a lot of work. It ends up being like 10 minutes of listing every demon you can think of. And so
hmm.
at some point, what happened actually in history with it was that they created the any other evil, Sumner Remnu.
Yep.
And so that was like, let no lurker, no vampire, no croucher, no stalker, no shadow, no shade, or any other evil that we have forgotten.
Mm,
But as time went on, in the eyes of the younger priests who were studying, as they came up studying, they're like, this must be its own spirit. So the Simnarabu ended up being another type of spirit, and that did form from the UPG of these students. And there are things I have found where it's like, okay, I can see this theme going over and over and over again. I've dug into every text I can on it. I've consulted everybody I can, and it seems like my idea of this is in line. So I'm going to tack this into my practice.
Love that.
I I have a personal prayer that I've wrote that grants imparts wisdom over food that I've eaten. I was
Mm.
in a riddle contest with another witch, and I couldn't solve the riddle for days. And I'd gone to the store and I had bought a snowball, and because I love me some snowballs, and I was just like, I was talking on the phone with some people I knew. I'm like, I can't solve this riddle. I can't solve it. And I broke down. I was just like, Enki, Lord of Wisdom, Master of the Secrets of the Deep, infuse your wisdom into this food I'm about to consume and grant me insight. And, I wrote the prayer out. I did the prayer. I ate the snowball. And by the time I finished the second one, it was like, I solved the riddle. And I had
Mm.
solved it correctly. So now it's my UPG that this is a prayer I can use over food when I am unable to see an answer.
I love that. Yeah. There is always some adaptations that can be done and
There is.
ingenuity. Yeah. The
There's adoptions,
where
and then
there's a
there's
need, there's an answer. And then I had a question which I know is going to put you on a soapbox. It's on the ancient alien part of the Anunnaki, which we're both in agreement. I think it's absolutely silly. Um, how has the popular ancient alien theory affected the way that you have to explain your path to others? And what do you feel is the biggest spiritual loss when the gods are reduced to these extraterrestrials?
well, it is a bit of a soapbox. Because I do have to be like, no, I don't worship aliens. No, I'm not the
Mm,
UFO cult of the '70s. That's not what we're doing here. I promise. And there's a big loss because we both know that the systemic message within a lot of this ancient alien theory stuff is that
mm.
non-white civilizations couldn't accomplish great things.
Yeah.
So this is something we have to contend with. Like, literally, the name for the Mesopotamian people themselves translated to the black-headed ones. They were very proud of their complexion. It was made in the way of their gods. And if we'd be like, yeah, but y'all weren't smart enough to do this, then, like, we're immediately disrespecting the image of these people, their
Yeah.
history, their idea of the image of the gods. So
Mm,
that's really bad. When we also, it feels like it loses validity, even in the neo-pagan communities. If you
mm.
say you worship Hecate, and we all know God, and we'd be like, all right, a Hecate devotee, that's valid. But then if I walk up and be like, I pray to an alien, then everyone's gonna be like, you can leave. You can leave. So
Yeah,
like
yeah, the side eye.
on there, and it does remove the depth
Mm,
of these things. I have like there's so many when you look at the traditions and the gods themselves and all their stories. There's a lot that was put into this. Mesopotamians loved writing; they wrote everything down, and they told these stories all the time. And like it's really weird to just be like, no, these were aliens because just did you know, for instance, that the disabled are specifically blessed and special to Enki? Because he got drunk one day and he made a betting contest with his wife that he could make something better than she did. And he just started making things, and then one day somebody he makes something without a leg, or this one can't see. He's like, oh, I made some mistakes here. Come, you are my special children now. I have to take care of the problem I put out. And we have gods of people who are trans. Well, there's a deity who was a god and dreamed every day of becoming a goddess, and eventually through that power was able to become a goddess, and she's associated with dreams now. Like all these little things that like that story doesn't work if it's an alien.
yeah, yeah.
We go from a god stepping up and accepting disabled people because he made a mistake in a moment of hubris to some like drunk redneck alien was like, what if I give this man half a leg? and sent it out, right? Like it
Hmm.
changes that narrative, and so it loses a lot. We don't see it as much anymore. The ancient alien things has kind of gone by the wayside. I do think a lot of our other modern takes, though, on these deities is what we're losing a lot more with.
Mm.
Uh, I did an experiment one day in the r/sumer subreddit, and I counted how many times different deities' names came up.
Mm.
And do you take a guess which name came up the most out of any deity?
Probably Enki.
It wasn't. It was
Wasn't?
Ishtar.
It was
Everybody
Ishtar?
wants to praise Ishtar without understanding what that takes. Everyone wants to take this idea, like Ishtar's descent is supposed to be this merging your
Mm.
shadow self, female empowerment thing, and that's the way we view it now. But that's not, and that's how we treated a lot of these. And I have such a big gripe, especially with the descent mythos. And I
Yeah.
know somebody had wanted me to talk on that because that's not how they viewed it. The way
Mm.
that story starts, Ishtar, the queen of heaven, and all that she had surveilled, wished for more power. So she went to take her sister's domain. She went there under the guise of mourning the death of the Lady of the Great Earth's husband, who is the bull of heaven, by the way, that she caused the death of. And so
Hmm.
she went there to pretend to do that so she could seize her sister's domain. And her sister was like, "Sister of mine, this don't work. You're in my realm. Play by my rules. Go, strip her of all her stuff, crucify her, hang her up on my wall, torture and kill her. This is what happens when you encroach this." And before that, Ishtar thought she was hot shit. There was a humbling that had to happen. This wasn't about grabbing your divine, your empower. This was no,
Yeah.
time comes and you die or you need to go to the underworld. It is humbling. It changes everything about you. And there
Hmm.
are scars afterwards. Her then husband now has to spend half the year in the underworld, and her husband's sister has to spend the other half. Like, nobody goes through the underworld unchanged.
Yeah.
Hubris will be your downfall. That's what that story was about. But we've popped it up with pop psychology and tying it to the shadow self. It's like, no, no, they were talking about something that is much more important.
Yeah.
Why is hubris a problem, and how do you undergo an initiation, undergo a catabasis? What happens when you descend and
Hmm.
rise back? And that's what they wanted to speak on. And we have many of these things where we've lost all that depth because how we want to view these, be it aliens or be it this more modern view, has removed a lot of this nuance. And
Hmm.
it's something I constantly try to bring awareness to.
Awesome. Well, I believe we are coming up on the top of the hour, and I
Hmm.
would definitely love to have you back because I think there's a lot we can peel into on Mesopotamia and different aspects of the practice. Uh, do you have any socials that you would like to shout out for yourself that people can find you if they want to learn more?
Yeah, you can find me on TikTok, Heresiarch Dari. It's Laverna Prophet. On that's got a link tree to everything. I don't know who else is going to watch this, so I don't want to give out the Discord, and I keep my other stuff private. But you can also find me on my Substack. That's Shahansha Cyprian or at Rubido and Ramku. And then you can find me on Amazon with my two books. There's more coming out soon. So everything you can find me on should be on my link tree
In your
on.
TikTok?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, guys, we will see you next time, and thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and have a blessed day.
Well, have a wonderful day.